Welcome to my chess channel, Chess Wonderland. This channel is for anyone and everyone who wants to learn and improve chess over time. Well, my name is Alice, a rather fictitious name. And it's a perfect one because Alice is now in Chess Wonderland. I intend to make chess learning more fun, and I'm sure all of you are going to like it. I love chess, and it's my passion. I'm going to start covering basics of chess, and in future videos, we'll be expanding on opening principles, middle games, and endgames. Of course, puzzles too. Come on, let's go! Welcome to my Chess Wonderland. So here we're going to start covering the basics of chess. When you look at the board, you can see that there are 64 squares, 32 light squares, and 32 dark squares. There are 16 pieces for each side, and they each move in a different and unique way. The pawns, which are the soldiers of chess, there are 8 of them, move 1 square or 2 squares on the first turn. Also, there's the rook. There are 2 rooks for each side, 2 knights for each side, 2 bishops for each side, a king, and a queen for each side. The king is the one we're trying to checkmate, which we will go into later, and the queen is the most powerful piece on the board. So the pawn, as mentioned earlier, moves 2 squares or 1 square on its first turn, but it cannot go more than 2 squares or 1 square. It cannot go more than 1 square after it has moved. It has moved. For example, if I move it 1 square, then I can't move it 2 squares on the next turn if I'm planning to move it again. And if I move it 2 squares, I still cannot move it 2 squares if I'm planning to move it on the next turn. And the knight is moving in an L shape. An easy way to remember this is to go 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3. So you can also do 1, 2, but it is important to mention that you should not count the square that your knight is actually on. So the knight, it's a tricky piece, but you should be able to memorize it. Memorize the movement of the knight pretty quickly. The bishop moves in diagonals, as you can see, but it cannot move over pieces like the knight can do. For example, it cannot move over this pawn and go to this square because also the computer is not allowing me to because the pawn is blocking the bishop. It should also be noted that the bishop is only able to move in the color complex it is on throughout the game. Unlike the knight, which if it's on a light square, it can move to a dark square, and if it's on a dark square, it moves to a light square. So, there are 2 bishops. If you have a dark squared bishop, then it can only move to dark squares, and when you have a light squared bishop, it can only move to light squares. And for the rooks moves horizontally and vertically. And there's not much to say about the rook. And that's basically just it. The queen, which is the most powerful piece on the board, moves combined the rook and the bishop. It cannot move like a knight. Only the knight moves like the knight. It can only move in an L shape. The other pieces cannot imitate the knight. So the queen moves like a rook and a bishop. It cannot move again like the bishop. It cannot move like a knight. It cannot jump over pawns or pieces. So right now it can't move. But if it was on an open board, it would be able to control the squares horizontally, vertically, diagonally, and that's it. So it would be able to control light squares and dark squares. So it moves it likes 2 bishops and a rook because it can move both on light squares and on dark squares. And the king, which is the most important piece of the army, basically, can only move 1 square at a time. It's like a grandfather, and it's very important in an endgame, which we'll be covering in later videos. But the main purpose of the king is to stay on the board and guide the army. If your king gets checkmated, you lose. If the opponent's king gets checkmated, you win. So now that we have covered the basic movements of the pieces, I'll just make some random moves and show you, and give you a more deeper understanding of how the pieces move. So for example, the pawn captures in a very interesting way. It captures this way. So when a piece is on this square, or if your pawn is here, if a piece is on this square, it can capture it. So now, as you can see, it's diagonal, one square diagonal. There's a pawn there, so I can take that pawn. So again, the queen moves like a rook, and now since this file has been opened, it can take the pawn. This is called a Scandinavian defense, but we'll go into openings a bit later. And the knight moves like an L shape, and the knight can move this way. It can move to all of these squares. Sorry, not there. Not there. It can move here, and then it can move here. So it cannot move here or here for the moment since the piece is occupying that square. But it can go back, and it can go forward at the same time. So now, as you can see, the knight is attacking the queen and threatening to take it, which will result in a 9-point lead. The queen is worth 9 points, the rook is worth 5 points, the knight is worth 3 points, the bishop is worth 3 points, the pawn is worth 1 point, and the king is worth unlimited points. Since if you checkmate, you win. So the queen, after it moves, I'm just going to make a random really bad move. Now the bishop's line has been opened, and it can actually take this queen, since it also moves like a pawn, but it can move, in both directions. Since you're seeing, I cannot move this bishop to this square since the piece is blocking. So I can take the queen, and now I'm able to move these directions. And the rook moves in a different way. Let me just make some normal moves. And it can move this way right now, but there is an also very important rule that the king can do. If the king is on its original square, for e1 for white, e8 for black, we'll go into notations later as well, then it can actually make a castling rule. Let me make a move for black. And the castling is basically when the king goes 2 squares, the side it wants to castle, and you put the rook over the other square. For example, like this. So you can see the rook jumps over the king. This is the only time a piece can jump over something other than a knight. And you can see that now the king is inside and the rook is outside. This can only be possible if the square, if the squares that the king moves through are not controlled, and that if the square the king moves to g1 is not controlled, and if it's in check after it is castled, then of course you cannot castle because you will be in check. We'll go into check a little bit later as well. And also, this rook can jump over, so now it's more mobile. And okay, we'll go into the queen also right now. So since black doesn't have a queen, since he or she gave it up really pretty easily, white is winning because he has 8 points. He has an 8-point material lead. So let's say that I move something for black, and I'm going to move this pawn 2 squares for white. There is a rule I'm going to mention, that there's an en passant rule, which means in passing, that we will go into right now. It's basically when a pawn moves. I'll just move this pawn. And the pawn is on the 5th rank. If it's white's turn, like the pawn is here, and if the pawn is on this, if the pawn moves 2 squares, if the back pawn moves 2 squares next to it, it's only 2 squares. If it moves 1 square and then 1 square, it doesn't count. then the pawn can actually take this way and eliminate the piece off the board. So it has to be next to each other, and it has to be on the 5th rank for white and the 4th rank for black. Okay, so if a pawn is on the 4th rank and a pawn pushes 2 squares next to it, it can take for black, and then if a pawn is on the 5th rank and a pawn pushes, it can take for white. Okay, and this is the opposite rule explained. And now we'll go into check. So check is a basic rule that you're attacking the king, and if the king doesn't move, you're going to take it. So again, the pawn captures this way. So if black makes a normal move like this, and the computer is not allowing me to do it because it is illegal, then black will lose. It's an illegal move, and in FIDE terms, which is a chess organization, you will lose the game. So white, there are 3 main moves, ways to escape from check, excuse me. And those are, capture the piece. In this way, you can take with the knight, you can take with this knight, you can take with that knight, or you can take with the bishop. You cannot take with the king because the queen is defending the piece. You cannot take something if with the king if the piece is protected by another piece. For example, if a bishop was here and the king was and the black king was here and the knight is defending the bishop, you cannot take the bishop since the knight is defending the bishop. So the same applies here. You cannot take the pawn with the king because the queen is defending the pawn, but you can take it with other pieces, like the bishop and knight here. So that's the capture. If you can take it, then that's one way to escape from check. Another is to move away, and the king can move away from check in these ways. And the last one is to block, and there is no way to block here because when a pawn checks you, you either have to take or run away. And the same with the knight, because you cannot block a check here. You know, blocking means to, like, you know, if a rook is checking you here, pretend this pawn isn't here, then you can block with the bishop, or you can block with the knight, or if you can block with the bishop if it's possible. But since the pawn is checking you, you cannot block with anything. So you will have to take it or you will have to run away. Best option here is to take it since it's not defended any more than the queen. And if you give it up, then you will lose 9 points for 3 points. Very poor trade. So after this, there is checkmate, which means there's also promotion first. Let me explain promotion first. Promotion is when the pawn reaches the 8th rank if it's white, or the 1st rank if it's black. You can promote to 4 different pieces: the queen, the knight, the rook, or the bishop. The queen is by far the best one since it's the most powerful piece on the board. The rook is the second best one since it's the second best, and you know, so on, the bishop and then the knight. But the bishop and the knight are hardly promoted because the queen is usually the best piece to promote to. Here it is because black gets mated. But if it was black and he had a pawn here, and then he could take and then promote to a piece. So now he can also take and promote to a piece, like you know, maybe let's say the bishop now. You know, it's not very good, but you know, it's still okay. Here since white is up 13 points. So in end games, which we'll go on again into later, then promotion is a very important concept, since the pawns will be racing against each other to checkmate the opponent's king. And now going into checkmate here, promoting the pawn here is actually a checkmate, since this queen is defending this queen and the king cannot move. Checkmate is the type of check where black has no way to escape the check. He can't block it, he can't run away, and he can't take the piece that is checkmating him, or the piece that is checking him. So here, it's checkmate because the king cannot run away. These squares are blocked, and these squares are controlled by the queen. And he cannot take it because the queen is controlling this queen. And he cannot also block it because it's a direct check, which means he cannot put anything in the way to stop the check or stop the checkmate. Those are the basic rules of chess, and after I have explained all of them, I hope you liked my video and channel. If you do, please like the video and subscribe to my channel by clicking the subscribe link below, and see you soon next video. Thank you. Bye.